Commander Veltar pressed their face against the cold metal wall of the command center and watched the last tiny dot of light vanish into the darkness of space. That dot was the final escape pod, carrying the last of their crew to safety. Now, Veltar was completely alone on a dying ship, floating in the vast emptiness between the stars. The ship shook slightly as another system failed somewhere deep in its belly. 3 hours ago, everything had been normal. The crew of the research vessel Nova's Edge had been working on their experiments, studying the mysterious dark matter that fills the universe. Then the quantum core that powered their ship had exploded in a chain reaction that couldn't be stopped. Within minutes, alarms were screaming throughout the ship. Emergency lights bathed everything in red. The captain had ordered immediate evacuation, following the strict rules of the Galactic Council. When a ship was dying and couldn't be saved, the law was simple and harsh. Save who you can, leave behind what you cannot. Commander, all 63 crew members have been evacuated successfully, announced Iris, the ship's computer. Her voice echoed in the empty command center, where dozens of people had worked just hours before. I calculate you have exactly 43 hours and 17 minutes of breathable air remaining. Veltar looked around at the dark screens and broken controls that surrounded them. The ship felt like a tomb now. Everything was quiet except for the soft hiss of the air recycling system that was slowly dying. Soon even that sound would stop forever. This wasn't just any ordinary ship. The Nova's Edge was the most advanced research vessel in the galaxy. For 15 long years, the best scientists from dozens of different worlds had worked aboard this ship. They had discovered things about the universe that no one had ever known before. Their research about dark matter could change everything scientists thought they knew about space and time. All of that knowledge was stored in the ship's massive computer banks. Normally, they would have sent all the data back to the research stations using powerful transmitters. But the explosion that killed the ship's power had also destroyed the transmission array. Now all those years of work would die along with the ship. Iris, are any ships answering our emergency signal? Veltar asked, though they already knew what the answer would be. No, Commander. The Altarian military cruiser Stellar Wind received our distress call 40 minutes ago. They recorded our status as beyond salvage parameters and continued their journey to Kepler Station. According to standard emergency protocols, no ship should risk their crew to attempt rescue of a vessel that cannot be saved. The words hit Veltar like a physical blow. Beyond salvage parameters. That was the cold mathematical way the galaxy decided who lived and who died. Every ship captain learned the calculations in training. How much fuel would a rescue cost? How much time? How much risk to their own crew? If the numbers didn't add up, you left people behind. Veltar understood the logic, even agreed with it. In the vast darkness of space, ships and crews were precious. You couldn't risk losing 2 ships trying to save one that was already doomed, but understanding the logic didn't make it hurt any less. They floated over to the main view screen and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, their crew was safe on other ships heading back to their homeworlds. The young scientist Park would return to his family on Centauri Prime. Dr. Kim would continue her medical research on the orbital stations around Vega. Engineer Lee would probably get a new assignment on another ship within a few weeks. That thought made Veltar smile despite everything. At least their people would live. That was worth dying for. In 43 hours the air would run out. Veltar would simply fall asleep and never wake up. It wasn't the worst way to go. Many space explorers had died much more violently when their ships were torn apart by asteroid impacts or sucked into black holes. The commander closed their eyes and tried not to think about all the things they would never see again. The ship was getting colder by the hour. Veltar pulled their uniform jacket tighter as they walked through corridors that had once buzzed with activity. The computer was automatically shutting down anything that wasn't absolutely necessary to keep them alive. First, the artificial gravity in the outer sections had failed. Then the lights in empty rooms had flickered out one by one. Now even the heating system was running at minimum power. Their footsteps echoed strangely in the empty hallways. Every sound seemed louder now that there were no voices, no conversations, no laughter to fill the silence. The ship felt enormous and tiny at the same time. Enormous because Veltar was the only living thing aboard a vessel designed for over 60 people. Tiny because it was just a small metal box floating in the infinite darkness of space. They stopped at Laboratory 7, where Dr. Kim had made her breakthrough discovery about dark matter particles just 2 weeks ago. Her coffee cup was still sitting on the desk, next to her computer, half full and now frozen solid. Personal photos of her family were still taped to the wall above her workstation. In the rush to evacuate, she had grabbed her research files, but left behind these small pieces of her life. Veltar continued walking, passing more reminders of the crew that was no longer there. Engineer Park's toolbox sat open in the maintenance bay, wrenches and plasma cutters scattered around where he had been working when the alarm sounded. In the crew quarters, beds were unmade and lockers hung open. Someone had left a book on their pillow, the bookmark still marking their place on page 247. The observation deck was Veltar's favorite place on the ship. The massive, transparent aluminum windows offered a perfect view of the stars. During normal operations, crew members would come here during their off hours to relax and watch the universe drift by. Now it was just another empty room with chairs nobody would ever sit in again. 31 hours remaining, Iris announced in her calm, emotionless voice. The computer had been programmed to give regular updates about life support, even though there was nothing either of them could do about it. Thank you, Iris. Keep watching the long-range sensors for any ships that might be passing through this area. There was a pause before Iris responded. Commander, I must point out that this request is not logical. The nearest shipping route used by commercial or military vessels is 7 light-years away from our current position. Even if a ship left that route immediately and traveled toward us at maximum hyperspace speed, they could not arrive in less than 72 hours. You have only 31 hours of life support remaining. Veltar sat down in one of the observation chairs and stared out at the field of stars that had been their life's work for so many years. Each point of light represented a sun, probably with planets, possibly with life. Out there, trillions of beings were going about their daily lives, completely unaware that a Cytherian commander was slowly dying alone in the space between worlds. Know the mathematics, Iris, but giving up has never been part of my nature. Continue scanning. Understood, Commander. The hours passed slowly. Time seemed to move differently when you knew exactly how much of it you had left. Veltar tried to stay busy. They recorded messages for their family back on Kythera, though the damaged communication array meant those messages would never be transmitted. They wrote detailed reports about the research that would die with the ship, hoping against hope that someone might eventually find the wreckage and recover the data. They spoke into their personal log, telling stories about the crew members who had served under their command, about Park's terrible jokes that somehow always made people laugh anyway, about Dr. Kim's habit of working through meals when she was excited about a discovery, about young technician Lee, who had joined the crew just 6 months ago and was already showing incredible promise as a starship engineer. As the hours crawled by, Veltar began to accept what was coming. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations had looked at the situation and made their calculations. The cost of attempting a rescue was too high. The risk was too great. The mathematics of survival had no room for hope or sentiment. But still, they couldn't bring themselves to give up. Completely, something deep inside kept whispering that miracles might still be possible, even in the cold emptiness of space. Veltar had been drifting in and out of sleep in the command chair when Iris's voice suddenly cut through the silence like a knife. But this time, the computer's normally calm voice was different. There was something that sounded almost like excitement in her electronic tone. "Commander," Iris called out with unusual urgency, "I am detecting an approaching vessel on long range. Sensors." Veltar's eyes snapped open and they jerked upright in the chair. After so many hours of hopeless waiting, they had almost stopped believing this moment would come. Their heart began racing as they struggled to focus on Iris's words. "Give me full specifications on the approaching ship," Veltar demanded, suddenly wide awake. "The configuration is completely unknown to me, Commander. I have searched through every ship design in my database, including military vessels, civilian transports, and experimental craft from all known galactic civilizations. This vessel matches nothing in my records." That was strange. Iris had detailed information about ships from thousands of different worlds and species. Her database included everything from tiny personal shuttles to massive battle cruisers. How? Could there be a ship design she had never seen before? What else can you tell me about them? Veltar asked. Most unusual, Commander. They are broadcasting their communications on primitive radio frequencies using electromagnetic spectrum transmission. This is a communication method that was abandoned by all civilized galactic species over 3,000 years ago. It is extremely inefficient and limited in range. The main view screen flickered and came to life, showing a grainy image of the approaching vessel. Veltar stared in amazement at what they saw. This ship looked like nothing they had ever encountered in their decades of space travel. Where every galactic ship was designed to be smooth and elegant, this craft was rough and angular. Its hull was covered with thick armor plating that had been welded on in sections, giving it a patchwork appearance. Weapon turrets stuck out from the sides like metal thorns. Extra engines had been bolted onto the rear in a way that would horrify any proper starship engineer. The entire vessel looked like it had been built by someone who cared more about function than beauty. Commander, they are attempting to communicate with us, Iris reported. The transmission quality is quite poor by galactic standards. Put them through, Veltar ordered. The bridge filled with the sound of static and electronic noise. Then a voice came through the speakers, speaking galactic standard, but with an accent so thick that Veltar had to concentrate to understand the words. Unknown vessel in distress. This is Captain Lee of the Earthship Defiant. We picked up your emergency signal and are responding. Please tell us what your situation is. Veltar felt their blood turn cold. Earth. They had heard stories about Earth, whispered tales shared among deep space explorers. Earth was a small world on the very edge of galactic civilization, home to a species called humans. But humans were quarantined from the rest of the galaxy. The Galactic Council had declared them too primitive and too violent to be allowed into civilized space. What was a human ship doing out here in the deep void between star systems? And how had they even detected the Nova's Edge's distress signal when much more advanced ships had ignored it? Veltar activated the communication system with shaking hands. This is Commander Veltar of the Catherian research vessel Nova's Edge. Our quantum core has suffered complete failure. Life support systems are critical and failing. All other vessels that received our distress call have declared our situation to be beyond salvage parameters. There was a pause filled with static. Then the human captain's voice came back, and there was something in his tone that Veltar had not heard from any of the other ships that had abandoned them. It was determination mixed with something that sounded almost like anger. Understood, Nova's Edge. We copy your situation, and we are moving to assist. Prepare your docking bay for our arrival. We're going to get you out of there. Veltar stared at the view screen in disbelief. This primitive human ship was actually planning to attempt a rescue that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had declared impossible. Either these humans were completely insane, or they knew something about the impossible that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Captain Lee, Veltar said carefully, you should know that our ship is very large, and our situation is extremely dangerous. Several other vessels have already determined that rescue is not possible. Another pause. Then Captain Lee's voice came back, and this time Veltar could hear what sounded like a smile in his words. Commander, we specialize in situations that other people think are impossible. Just hang tight, we're coming to get you. The airlock door made a loud hissing sound as it opened, and 3 figures in thick spacesuits stepped onto the Nova's Edge. Veltar watched from the docking bay as the strangers moved with quick, confident steps. Their equipment looked strange and rough, like it had been put together from spare parts and held together with determination rather than proper engineering. The first human pulled off their helmet with a quick motion, and Veltar got there first. Close look at a member of the species they had only heard about in stories. The woman had short black hair and a face that showed the lines and scars of someone who had faced danger many times and survived. Her eyes were sharp and alert, constantly scanning the area around them as if looking for threats or solutions. Captain Lee Suna, she said in a voice that was calm but carried authority. She gestured to her companions. This is Engineer Park and Medic Kim. We're here to get you out of this situation. Veltar felt overwhelmed trying to understand what was happening. These humans had appeared out of nowhere to attempt a rescue that the galaxy's best had declared impossible. "Captain, I appreciate your offer to help, but with all respect, your ship appears to be much smaller than mine. The Nova's Edge is a massive research vessel. Attempting to tow us would be impossible?" Engineer Park interrupted with a slight grin, already walking over to pull open wall panels so he could examine the ship's internal systems. "Yeah, we hear that word a lot in our line of work. Kim, the commander looks like they're suffering from oxygen deprivation. Get them on stimulants. Soon, their main power core is completely destroyed, but I think I can work with what's left." The medic named Kim approached Veltar carrying a device that made the commander take a step backward. It looked like some kind of injection system, but it was clearly military equipment designed for battlefield conditions. In civilized galactic society, this type of combat stimulant was strictly controlled and often completely illegal. "This will help counteract the effects of breathing thin air for so many hours," Kim explained in a gentle voice that contrasted with the dangerous-looking device in their hands. "I know it looks scary, but you need to trust us. We've done this before." Veltar hesitated for a moment, then nodded. What choice did they have? As the injection hit their bloodstream, they immediately felt energy and strength returning to their body. The fog that had been clouding their thoughts began to clear, and they could think more clearly than they had in hours. "I have to ask," Veltar said as they watched the humans work with incredible speed and efficiency. "Why are you doing this? Your species isn't even part of the Galactic Council. According to everything I know, humans are quarantined to their home system. You don't owe me anything, and you certainly don't owe anything to the galactic civilization that has rejected your people." Captain Lee looked up from where she was studying the damage reports on a portable computer. Her expression was serious but not unfriendly. "The answer is simple, Commander. Someone needs help and we're in a position to provide that help. That's reason enough for us." "But the risk to your own crew, your own ship," Veltar protested. "Engineer." Park laughed as he worked, pulling apart damaged systems with his hands. "Risk is part of the job. Besides, we humans have a saying, today you, tomorrow me. Help someone today and maybe someone will help you when you need it tomorrow." Medic Kim was checking Veltar's vital signs with a handheld scanner. "Also, we're naturally stubborn. When someone tells us something can't be done, our first instinct is to prove them wrong." Veltar watched in amazement as the three humans worked together like a perfectly coordinated team. They moved with the kind of efficiency that came from working together through many dangerous situations. Each person seemed to know exactly what the others were thinking and what needed to be done next. "How many impossible rescues have you attempted?" Veltar asked. Captain Lee smiled for the first time since boarding the ship. "This will be number 18. We're 17 for 17 so far. 17 successful, impossible rescues?" "That's right, Commander. We don't believe in leaving people behind." Veltar stood in shocked silence, watching Engineer Park do things to their ship that would have made any properly trained galactic engineer faint with horror. Park was using a plasma welding torch to attach what looked like spare engine parts directly to the Nova's Edge's outer hull. Bright sparks flew everywhere as he worked, and the smell of burning metal filled the air. "This is completely insane," Veltar muttered, unable to look away from the spectacle. "No starship engineer in the entire galaxy would even think about attempting something like this. You're violating every safety protocol and engineering principle that exists." Park looked up from his work for just a moment, grinning as more sparks showered around him. "Well, it's a good thing we're not galactic engineers then, isn't it? We're human engineers, and we follow different rules. Our main rule is simple. If it works, it's not stupid." The sound of the welding torch was almost deafening in the confined space. Park was somehow managing to jury-rig connections between the two ships' power systems using components that were never designed to work together. It looked like something a desperate person might try in their garage, not a solution for deep space rescue operations. Captain Lee pressed a button on her communication device. "Defiant, this is Captain Lee. Give me a full status report on our ship's condition." The reply came through with slight static. "Captain, Our main reactor is currently running at 127% of normal capacity. Hull stress. Readings are within what we consider acceptable parameters for this type of operation. Engineer Jin has the heavy tow cables prepared and ready for deployment. Veltar's voice cracked with disbelief. Did they just say 127%? That's far beyond any safe operating threshold. Your reactor could explode. Captain Lee's response was delivered in the same calm tone she had used for everything else. Safety thresholds are really just suggestions, Commander. When it comes to survival, there's no such thing as negotiable. We do whatever it takes. She looked over at Park. How much longer do you need before we can start moving? Give me about 10 more minutes, Park called back, not stopping his work. I'm rerouting what's left of their emergency power supply through our ship's auxiliary systems. It's not going to be pretty or elegant, but it will definitely work. Veltar watched in a mixture of fascination and horror as the humans broke every rule of proper engineering that they had ever learned. These people were taking systems that were never meant to work together and somehow making them function as a single unit. It was like watching someone perform surgery with kitchen utensils and somehow saving the patient's life. As Park worked his impossible magic, something amazing happened. The Nova's Edge's emergency lighting system, which had been dead for hours, suddenly flickered and came back to life. Dim red lights began glowing throughout the ship, and Veltar could hear the hum of systems that had been silent since the core. Explosion! Incredible, Veltar whispered. You're actually bringing my ship back to life. Before anyone could respond, Jin's voice came through the communication system with urgent news. Captain Lee, we have a problem. 3 unidentified ships just dropped out of hyperspace about 50,000 kilometers from our position. Based on their configuration and movement patterns, I'm reading them as salvage pirates. Captain Lee's relaxed expression immediately hardened into something much more dangerous. So of course they show up now. Pirates always have perfect timing. She looked at Park with sharp focus. How much longer before we can get moving? About 5 more minutes, Park shouted over the noise of his welding work. We don't have 5 minutes. If those are really pirates, Lee said grimly. She pressed her communication button again. Jin, power up all weapon systems immediately. Looks like we're going to have to fight our way out of here. Veltar felt their hearts sink. After everything the humans had done to save them, they were all about to be destroyed by space pirates who wanted to steal the wreckage of the Novas. Hedge! The rescue that had seemed impossible was about to become a battle that looked equally impossible to win. But as Veltar looked at Captain Lee's determined face, they realized that these humans might have a few more surprises left to show them. 6 hours had passed since the Defiant had begun pulling the massive Nova's Edge through space toward safety. What had started as an impossible rescue was now becoming something even more desperate. The human ship was literally tearing itself apart from the incredible strain of towing a vessel many times larger than itself. The sounds coming from the Defiant were getting worse by the hour. Metal groaned and creaked as the ship's frame was stretched beyond its limits. Warning alarms that had been beeping occasionally were now blaring constantly. Through the communication link between the two ships, Veltar could hear the stress in the voices of the human crew as they fought to keep their vessel together. Captain Lee, Park's voice came through the speakers, and Veltar could hear the exhaustion and worry. Hull stress readings are now at critical levels. I'm seeing microfractures forming along the main structural supports. The frame cannot take much more of this punishment. Sweat was visible on Park's forehead as he worked, frantically at his control panels, trying to redistribute the load and strengthen weak points in the ship's structure. His hands moved quickly over the controls, but Veltar could see that even his incredible engineering skills were reaching their limits. Captain Lee's voice was steady, but Veltar could detect the tension underneath. Jin, how much farther do we have to go before we reach Sanctuary Station? At our current speed, we're still 18 hours away from docking, Jin replied. The navigator's voice was calm, but the numbers spoke for themselves. Veltar quickly did the mathematical calculations in their head. The human ship was already at the breaking point after only 6 hours of towing. There was no way the Defiant could survive another 18 hours of this incredible stress. The ship would literally tear apart in space, killing everyone aboard. Captain Lee, Veltar said with a heavy heart, you have to abandon the tow operation. Immediately. You must save your crew. There's no shame in admitting that some things truly are impossible. Captain Lee was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked around at the other humans on the bridge, Park, Jin, Kim, and 2 other crew members, whose names Veltar had not yet learned. Her voice was serious as she addressed her people. You all heard the situation. What do you think we should do? Park looked up from his engineering console, his face tired but determined. Captain, we've already come this far. I say we finish what we started. Jin nodded in agreement from the navigation station. The Nova's Edge contains 15 years of deep space research data. That information could help millions of people throughout the galaxy understand the universe better. Kim spoke up from the medical station. I didn't become a doctor to watch people die just because the mathematics didn't work out in our favor. We save people, no matter what the odds say. The 2 other crew members both nodded silently, their faces showing the same determination that Veltar had seen in all the humans. Captain Lee nodded slowly. That settles it then. We continue the rescue. She turned to Park. How long can you keep our ship together? Park ran his hands through his hair as he studied his readings. Maybe 8 hours, possibly a little more, if I can transfer half of our crew over to the Nova's Edge. That will reduce our ship's mass and take some of the stress off our frame. The rest of us will have to stay here and ride out whatever happens. Do it, Captain Lee ordered without hesitation. As Veltar watched the humans begin their desperate plan, they felt a mixture of amazement and heartbreak. These beings had been dismissed by the galactic community as too primitive and violent to join civilized society. Yet here they were, willingly sacrificing themselves for a complete stranger and a ship full of scientific research they had never seen and would never benefit from. The humans worked with quiet efficiency as they prepared to split their crew between the 2 ships. Some would stay on the dying Defiant and risk everything to keep the tow operation going. Others would transfer to the Nova's Edge, ready to continue the mission if their own ship was destroyed. Veltar realized they were witnessing something that the advanced galactic civilizations had lost somewhere along the way: the willingness to risk everything for others, even when the mathematics said it was hopeless. The Defiant looked like it had been through a war by the time Sanctuary Station appeared on their sensors. The human ship was barely holding together, with hull plates twisted and bent, emergency patches covering dozens of stress fractures, and systems that should have failed hours ago somehow still functioning through pure stubbornness and Park's impossible engineering skills. Veltar watched the station grow larger on the view screen and felt their heart racing with a mixture of relief and disbelief. They had actually made it. Against all odds, mathematical calculations, and the opinions of the galaxy's greatest civilizations, the humans had succeeded in pulling off a rescue that everyone else had declared impossible. Sanctuary control, this. Is Captain Lee of the Earth vessel Defiant? Lee spoke into her communication device, her voice hoarse from exhaustion but still steady. We have an emergency tow situation and require immediate docking clearance. The response from the space station came back confused and bureaucratic. Defiant, this is Sanctuary Control. We show no record of any Earth vessels in our official registry. Please state your purpose and provide proper identification codes before we can— Control, Veltar interrupted urgently, grabbing the communication device from Captain Lee. This is Commander Veltar of the Catherian research vessel, Nova's Edge. These humans just saved my ship and 15 years of absolutely critical research data from certain destruction. I am requesting that you grant them emergency docking clearance immediately. There was a long pause filled with static. Veltar could imagine the confusion at the control center as they tried to process what they were hearing. A human ship. Humans weren't supposed to be operating in this part of space. They were quarantined to their home system because the Galactic Council considered them too dangerous and primitive. Finally, the controller's voice came back, much more respectful than before. Understood, Nova's Edge. We have Emergency Docking Bay 7 standing by for immediate arrival. Medical teams are being dispatched to assist with any injured personnel. As both ships slowly maneuvered toward the docking bay, the Defiant finally released the massive tow cables that had been pulling the Nova's Edge for 14 grueling hours. The human ship seemed to sag with relief as the incredible stress was finally removed from its damaged frame. Veltar felt something they had never experienced in their long career exploring the galaxy. It was more than gratitude, more than relief at being saved. It was genuine awe at what they had witnessed. The humans had succeeded where the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had failed, and they had done it not through superior technology or vast resources, but through something much simpler and much rarer: the absolute refusal to accept defeat when lives were at stake. The mathematical calculations had been clear. The rescue was impossible. The risk was too great. The cost was too high. But the humans had looked at those same numbers and decided that mathematics didn't matter when someone needed help. As the human crew began preparing to transfer back to their own battered ship, Veltar approached Captain Lee. The human woman looked exhausted, her uniform stained with grease and sweat, her face showing the strain of the last 14 hours. But there was satisfaction in her eyes, the look of someone who had accomplished something important. "Captain Lee," Veltar said, their voice heavy with emotion they rarely showed, "I want you to know that I will make sure the entire galaxy learns about what you and your crew did here today. This rescue will not be forgotten." For the first time since they had met, Captain Lee smiled, a genuine warm expression that transformed her weathered face. "We were just doing our job, Commander. Someone needed help, and we were in a position to provide it. That's all." "No," Veltar said quietly. "It was much more than that. You showed the galaxy something it had forgotten, that sometimes the most important things cannot be calculated or measured. Sometimes you just have to do what's right, regardless of the mathematics." Captain Lee nodded and extended her hand in the human gesture of friendship. "Take care of yourself, Commander, and take care of that research data. If it's as important as you say, the galaxy needs to see it." As Veltar watched the humans walk back toward their damaged ship, they realized that the galaxy was about to learn something new about the species they had dismissed as primitive and violent. These humans might just change everything. 3 months had passed since the impossible rescue, and Commander Veltar stood in the most important room in the galaxy. The Galactic Council Assembly Hall was enormous, with representatives from hundreds of different worlds sitting in curved rows that stretched up toward a domed ceiling decorated with stars. Today, Veltar was here to present the most significant scientific discovery in decades. Holographic displays floated around the chamber, showing complex data charts and three-dimensional models of cosmic phenomena. The information rescued from the Nova's Edge was spread out for everyone to see, glowing in blue and gold light that reflected off the polished faces of alien delegates. "Fellow members of the Galactic Council," Veltar began, their voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "The Nova's Edge deep space mission has completely revolutionized our understanding of how dark matter interacts with normal matter throughout the universe. This incredible breakthrough in scientific knowledge was made possible by a species that we have consistently dismissed as too primitive and dangerous for galactic society, the humans of Earth." Immediately, murmurs and whispers rippled through the assembly like water spreading across a pond. Representatives leaned toward each other, speaking in dozens of different languages. Some looked shocked, others curious, and a few appeared angry at the suggestion. The Altarian delegate, a tall being with silver skin and large black eyes, leaned forward in his seat. His voice carried the authority of one of the galaxy's oldest and most respected civilizations. "Commander Veltar, are you seriously suggesting that we should admit into our society a species that routinely violates basic safety protocols and engages in what can only be described as reckless and dangerous behavior?" Veltar had expected this question and was ready with their answer. "Honored delegate, I am suggesting that we consider admitting a species that defines the word impossible as simply meaning hasn't been done yet." Captain Lee and her crew succeeded in a rescue operation where our most advanced civilizations had already calculated failure and given up. They didn't succeed despite their unusual methods, they succeeded because of them. The debate that followed lasted for many hours. Representatives stood to argue about human behavior, their quarantine status, and whether beings who ignored safety regulations could be trusted in civilized space. But Veltar noticed something important. No one could argue with the results. The humans had saved both a life and scientific data that was already changing how the galaxy understood the universe. The rescue had been broadcast across every news network in known space. Citizens on thousands of worlds had watched the impossible happen in real time. Public opinion was shifting, and the Council was beginning to realize that their previous assessment of humanity might have been wrong. 6 months after that historic debate, Captain Lee Suna stood in a ceremony that no human had ever experienced before. She was receiving an official commission as the first human commander in the Galactic Rescue Corps, an organization that saved lives throughout known space. The Defiant had been completely rebuilt using the most advanced technology the galaxy could offer. The rough, patched-together ship that had performed the impossible rescue was now sleek and powerful, equipped with systems that would have seemed like magic to the original crew. But at its heart, it was still a human ship, designed to go places. Others wouldn't and do things others couldn't. Lee stood on the bridge of her new vessel, looking out at the star field through a view screen that was crystal clear. Beside her stood Veltar, who had requested assignment to the human ship. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, with ships breaking down in deep space and crews finding themselves in impossible situations every day. "So, Captain," Veltar said with what humans would recognize as a smile, "are you ready for the next impossible rescue mission?" Lee looked at her old friend and gave the same confident grin that had reassured a dying commander in the darkness of space. "Always, Commander. That's what we do." The stars stretched out before them, infinite and full of possibilities. Somewhere out there, someone would need help that others would declare impossible to provide. And when that happened, the humans would be ready to prove once again that impossible was just another word for a challenge they hadn't solved yet. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the greatest strength wasn't knowing when something couldn't be done, but refusing to believe it in the first place.